Listen, when we think of history, we often think of historical events or great battles or even great people like Alexander or Napoleon. But if I asked you if you knew who the first accredited author in the world was, would you know the answer? Well, then you would perhaps think of Homer, the blind poet from Greece, or maybe some of the writers of the Old Testament, but you would be far off. So sit back, relax, and let me tell you the incredible story of Enheduanna, the world's first known author, the High Priestess and Princess of the Akkadian Empire. The year is 2300 BCE in modern-day Iraq, and at this time the world is a patchwork of independent city-states. In the south you had the Sumerians, and they called themselves the black-haired people. They were the old guard, cleanly shaven and speaking a language unlike any other, and they were fiercely loyal to their local city gods. And to the north lived the Akkadians. They were different than the Sumerians in many ways. For example, they spoke a very ancient sort of Semitic language, and they had long flowing beards, and probably more importantly than that, they were very ambitious. And one Akkadian would prove to be more ambitious than the rest, and today we know him simply as Sargon the Great. And one interesting thing about Sargon is he started his career as a cupbearer for the king of Kish. Not exactly the type of role you'd expect from someone who would change history. But Sargon didn't stay a cupbearer for long. Over time he rose to power and started conquering ancient Sumerian cities. Places like Ur, Uruk, Lagash and Nippur. He even pushed his campaign all the way up to the Mediterranean Sea, and by doing that he created what many historians today would call the world's first empire. But Sargon had a problem. He had conquered the Sumerians, but he struggled to unify them into the new Akkadian empire. To many of the Sumerians, who were an old proud people, Sargon was seen as an outsider, a foreign ruler who used might and power to conquer their lands. So even though his empire looked strong, it was quite unstable, and Sargon was afraid of uprisings and that the Sumerians would claim back their cities. So in a tale as old as time, soldiers just wasn't enough to hold his empire together. He needed trust and he needed legitimacy. He needed a way to connect his new Akkadian empire with the old Sumerian world. And that is where his daughter, Enheduanna, comes into the picture. Sargon appointed his daughter as High Priestess of the moon god of Nanna in the city of Ur. And this position came with real political power, influence, and status among the people of the city. Because you see, in ancient Mesopotamia, temples were the beating hearts of the economy in the cities they were built in. From within these temples they managed the land, controlled the granaries and kept the records. So by placing his daughter Enheduanna within one of these temples, Sargon was actually just enforcing his rule over his newly acquired Sumerian city of Ur. Enheduanna would hold this position for over 40 years. But during her reign there, she was not content with just managing grain and doing other administrative and political duties. She quickly understood that if you want to rule the people, you have to speak to their soul. And so, she began to write. Before Enheduanna, writing at this time, also known as cuneiform, was quite the tedious task. It was used for accounting and creating lists of merchandise and also to record dry historical facts. And to do this sort of cuneiform writing, you'd find a reed stylus and you'd press wedge-shaped symbols onto wet clay. But better than me telling you how it was done, allow me to explain by showing you. We don't have reeds in Norway, but I found this bamboo stick in the garden that will just have to do. I've sharpened it with a knife to create that wedge-like shape to it. Now, I hope I don't offend any Akkadians out there with my ancient handwriting. I'm sure they would have struggled with our Latin alphabet as well. Let's speed this part up. Now, if we pause the video here, hopefully you're able to see that I've tried my best to spell Enheduanna the correct way. Can you see the resemblance? And now, a little bonus clip. Can you guess what I've written here? Feel free to pause the video if you'd like and use the alphabet I showed you earlier in the video to translate it. If you figure it out, please leave a comment with the name that you've just uncovered. And now, let's get back to the video. What made Enheduanna so special is that she used cuneiform in a way it had never been used before. She began using the word I. Enheduanna began sharing her own thoughts, fears and devotions, and in one of her greatest works, the Exaltations of Inanna, she writes, "My king, something has been created that no one has created before." At this moment in time, Enheduanna knew what she had created. She was self-aware and she realized she had created a fresh approach to human cultural exchange forever. And to prove the work was hers, she used a cylinder seal. It's a tiny stone cylinder with intricate carvings on it, which you roll across wet clay to create a unique signature. Her greatest literary accomplishment was a collection of 42 religious hymns. You see, at this time every city had their own unique god, and Enheduanna's genius was creating a unique hymn for every god of the major cities. Enheduanna glorified each unique city god, and she also managed to interconnect them into a system of gods where she gave every god unique traits and personalities like humor and anger and passion. And by doing that, she created a sort of connection between the gods and the people they were set to rule. Her masterpiece was her poetry to Inanna, the goddess of war and desire. And to the Akkadians, she was known as Ishtar. Enheduanna took these two identities and fused them together into one supreme empire-wide force. And by unifying the gods, she helped unify the people of the new Akkadian Empire. By doing so, she granted her father a sort of sacred legitimacy. If the gods are one, then the people should also be one. But as we all know, power is temporary, and so when her father Sargon died, a local general in the city of took control through a rebellion and decided to banish Enheduanna since she was the face of the ruling family. She was stripped of her title and sent into the vast desert to wander it alone. And in her writing you can feel the raw agony of this moment. She's been cast out into the desert, her dignity bruised, her crown has been taken from her, and her father's empire is in decline. But she never stopped writing. Instead, she used her poetry as a prayer, a call for justice, and a sort of consolation for herself in her desperate times of need. And it seems like it worked, because eventually her nephew, the legendary king Naram Sin, crushed the rebellion and managed to reinstate Enheduanna into her former position, now more powerful than ever. And after her death, she became so legendary that people began to worship her as a minor deity. And centuries later, her style and structure of writing would echo through the Hebrew Old Testament, the Psalms, and even the epics of Homer. And so I think it's important that when we think about history as a collection of great battles or great people, we should try to remember Enheduanna, the world's first author. And what I find truly fascinating is how would our history today look like without Enheduanna? And so, until our next journey together, remember, history is closer than you think.